It is 2026, and just last year, an American man died whose grandfather had been born in 1790. Not his great-great-grandfather, not a distant ancestor buried somewhere deep in a family tree. His grandfather. The man was Harrison Ruffin Tyler. He died in May 2025 at the age of 96. His grandfather was John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, born on March 29, 1790. At first, the dates look impossible. 235 years separate John Tyler's birth from Harrison Tyler's death. Most of us instinctively imagine a long chain of generations filling that gap. But there were only 3 men in the direct line that created this extraordinary bridge: John Tyler, his son Lyon Gardiner Tyler, and Lyon's son Harrison. The explanation is simple enough to state, but almost as surprising as the dates themselves. John Tyler was about 63 years old when Lyon was born in 1853. Then Lyon was 75 when Harrison was born in 1928. 2 unusually late fatherhoods, followed by Harrison's long life, compressed more than 2 centuries into just 3 generations. And the Tyler family is not the only example. In 2020, the United States was still paying a benefit connected to Civil War service to a woman whose father had been a Civil War soldier. Her name was Irene Triplett. That same year, another woman died who had been legally married to a Civil War veteran. Her name was Helen Viola Jackson, a president born in 1790 with a grandson alive in 2025, a daughter of a Civil War soldier alive in 2020, a wife of a Civil War veteran alive in 2020. These stories sound like mistakes in a family tree. They are not. They are reminders that history is measured in years, but families are measured in lives, and those 2 clocks do not always move at the same speed. John Tyler's case begins with a number that immediately changes the scale of the story. 15. Tyler had 15 children across 2 marriages. That matters because the extraordinary span of his family did not happen through some obscure collateral branch. Lyon Gardiner Tyler was one of his sons. Lyon was born in 1853 to John Tyler and Julia Gardiner Tyler. John Tyler had been born 63 years earlier, in 1790. Put those 2 dates next to each other. 1790, 1791. Already, one parent-child link has crossed 63 years. But that is only half of the bridge. Lyon Gardiner Tyler later became the father of Harrison Ruffin Tyler, who was born in 1928. Lyon was 75 at the time. Now the timeline becomes almost absurd to look at. John Tyler, 1790. Lyon Gardiner Tyler, 1853. Harrison Ruffin Tyler, 1928. Harrison's death, 2025. The distance from the first date to the last is 235 years. And yet the family relationship is only grandfather, father, son. That distinction is the entire reason this story feels impossible. We tend to convert dates into generations automatically. A person born in the 18th century feels like someone who should be separated from us by a long stack of greats. Great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, perhaps more. But genealogy does not follow an average schedule. A generation is not a fixed unit of 25 or 30 years. It is one parent-child relationship. And if a parent has a child late in life, that single relationship can cover a very large span of time. If the same thing happens again in the next generation, the effect compounds. That is what happened in the Tyler family. John Tyler's 63-year gap to Lyon was already unusual. Lyon's 75-year gap to Harrison stretched the line again. Then Harrison lived until 96. This is why the family tree matters more than the headline. The headline tells us that a president born in 1790 had a grandson alive until 2025. The family tree explains how. And in this case, the relationship is not based on a surname coincidence or a public family tree copied from someone else. The Tyler family is documented in institutional collections. The Library of Congress preserves the John Tyler papers, and surviving family materials include records tied to John Tyler and his descendants. That documentary chain is important because extraordinary claims are exactly where genealogy becomes vulnerable to mistakes. If someone tells you that a person born in 1790 had a grandson alive in 2125, the instinct to doubt it is healthy. The correct response is not to accept the claim because the surname matches. It is to reconstruct the relationships. John Tyler to Lyon, Lyon to Harrison. Birth dates, family records, institutional archives, death records. Once the chain is established, the paradox disappears. The dates remain extraordinary, but the genealogy becomes clear. And that leads to a second American family whose timeline compresses history even further. Because the next case does not require a grandfather. It requires only a father. In 2020, Irene Triplett was still receiving a federal benefit connected to her father's service in the Civil War. Read that sentence again carefully. Her father, not her grandfather, not her great-grandfather. Her father had been a Civil War soldier. The Department of Veterans Affairs publicly identified Irene as the daughter of a Civil War soldier and noted that she was still receiving a benefit tied to that service in 2020. The explanation again comes down to the timing of generations. Her father, Mose Triplett, was already 83 years old when Irene was born. One extraordinarily late parenthood pushed a direct parent-child link from the era of the Civil War deep into the 20th century. Irene then lived until 2020. That means a federal benefit tied directly to Civil War service was still reaching a soldier's daughter in 2020. The story sounds like a bureaucratic curiosity. For a genealogist, it is something more useful. It shows why pension records can be among the richest family records created by the federal government. A military service record and a pension file are not the same thing. A service record is primarily concerned with the soldier and his military service. A pension claim could require proof that another person had a legal or dependent relationship to that soldier. That difference could generate family evidence, marriage information, birth information, death information, affidavits, statements from relatives or neighbors, documents used to prove that a widow, child, or other claimant was connected to the veteran named in the file. This does not mean that every statement inside a pension file is automatically true. A file can contain claims, disagreements, missing documents, and rejected applications. But it can preserve the exact kinds of relationships that are often difficult to reconstruct from a census alone. Irene Triplett's case demonstrates the basic principle perfectly. The shocking part is the date. The proof is the relationship. And the relationship survives because records were created to document it. There is another reason her story matters. It exposes how misleading our mental picture of historical distance can be. The Civil War feels like a world sealed behind black and white photographs, monuments, and archive boxes. Yet in 2020, there was still a living daughter of a man who had served in that war. There was only one parent-child link between them. That is not typical. It should never be presented as typical. It is remarkable precisely because the ages involved were so unusual. But unusual family structures are part of real genealogy. They are why researchers cannot assume that every generation fits neatly into the same 25-year interval. A 70-year-old father changes the mathematics. An 83-year-old father changes it dramatically. And when that child lives a long life, an apparently distant historical era moves much closer to the present. But Irene Triplett's connection to the Civil War was created by birth. The third case is different. In 2020, Helen Viola Jackson died at the age of 101. In 1936, when she was 17, she married James Bolin. Bolin was 93 years old. He had served in the Union Army during the Civil War. Once again, the dates seemed to belong to separate worlds. A woman who lived into 2020 had been legally married to a man who had served in the Civil War. That relationship was not something invented by a later family legend. The marriage was documented. Jackson kept the marriage private for decades. She also never ultimately received the pension that Bolin had hoped the marriage could provide for her. Those details matter because this story can easily be distorted if it is reduced to a sensational headline about a 17-year-old girl and a 93-year-old man. For genealogy, the more important point is what the documented relationship does to our sense of historical distance. James Bolin belonged to the generation of men who served during the Civil War. Helen Viola Jackson belonged to a generation that lived into the 21st century. Marriage created a direct legal relationship between them. So now place the three stories next to one another. John Tyler was born in 1790. His grandson Harrison died in 2025. Moe's triplet served in the Civil War. His daughter Irene lived until 2020. James Bolin served in the Civil War. His wife Helen lived until 2020. Grandson, daughter, wife. Three ordinary family words, but attached to dates that seem completely incompatible with one another. That is the deeper idea behind these cases. History books divide time into eras. Family trees do not. A family tree is simply a chain of human relationships, and those relationships can stretch across time at very uneven speeds. One family may have children in their early 20s for several consecutive generations. Another may contain a father in his 60s, 70s, or 80s. One branch may move through 5 generations, while another moves through 3. The calendar does not care. A century is always a century. But a family line can cross that century through 2 parent-child links, 4, 5, or more. That is why the question, how many years ago, is not always the same question as how many generations ago. John Tyler's birth was 235 years before Harrison Tyler's death. But genealogically, John was only 2 parent-child steps away from Harrison. John to Lyon, Lyon to Harrison. That is what makes the story so powerful. It converts an abstract number, 235 years, into something human enough to understand. The same thing happens with Irene Triplet. Instead of saying the Civil War ended many generations before 2020, her family forces us to be more precise. In her direct line, her father was the veteran. One relationship. Helen Viola Jackson creates a different kind of bridge. She was not the child of a Civil War veteran. She was the spouse of one. Again, one relationship. None of these examples means that the past was normally this close. They mean that family structure can occasionally create astonishing exceptions. And those exceptions matter for genealogy because assumptions about age and generation are a common way researchers lose people. Imagine finding a man born in the 1850s listed as the father of a child born in the late 1920s. It is easy to decide that the record must be wrong. Sometimes it is wrong, but sometimes the family really is unusual. The solution is not to trust the surprising date blindly. It is also not to reject it because it violates your expectations. The solution is to test the relationship. That is where records come in. A surprising family timeline should be treated as a hypothesis until the documentary chain supports it. For a parent-child relationship, you may need birth records, baptismal records, census entries, wills, probate files, family papers, marriage records, death records, or other sources that connect one generation to the next. For military families, pension records can be especially valuable. because the government often required claimants to demonstrate exactly how they were related to the veteran. A widow might have to prove a marriage. A claim involving minor children might require evidence of their births and of the parents' marriage. Witnesses might be asked to provide affidavits. Family documents might be submitted. Those files can preserve relationships that are only implied elsewhere. But there is an important rule. A document is not valuable simply because it is official. Every record was created for a purpose, by someone at a particular time, using information supplied by one or more people. An affidavit records what a witness said. A pension application records what a claimant argued. A death record can contain information supplied by someone who may or may not have known the family history accurately. A family tree is strongest when multiple independent records point to the same relationship. That is why the Tyler story works so well. We do not need to look at the name Tyler and assume the connection. We can establish John, Tyler, then Lyon, then Harrison. The same principle applies to any family. Names are clues, dates are clues, stories are clues. But a chain of evidence is what turns those clues into a defensible genealogy. There is also a useful way to think about these three families together. The Tyler case is a chain of biological descent. John Tyler is Harrison's grandfather through Lyon. The triplet case is one parent-child relationship. The Jackson-Boland case is a marriage relationship. Those are different kinds of genealogical links, and they should not be blurred together. A marriage does not make Helen Viola Jackson a descendant of James Boland. A pension relationship does not by itself prove every statement made inside a claim file. A shared surname does not prove that two people belong to the same branch. And an age that looks plausible does not prove identity. The relationship has to match the question. If the claim is that Harrison was John Tyler's grandson, then the evidence has to establish two parent-child links. If the claim is that Irene Triplett was the daughter of a Civil War soldier, then the evidence has to establish the father-daughter relationship. If the claim is that Helen Viola Jackson was married to James Boland, then the evidence has to establish the marriage. This sounds obvious, but it is one of the most important disciplines in genealogy. Researchers often begin with a conclusion and then collect records that seem to fit it. Stronger research works in the opposite direction. It asks what relationship each record actually supports. That is especially important when a story is surprising enough to become famous. A headline can compress a complicated family history into one sentence. Genealogy has to unpack that sentence again. Take the Tyler headline. President born in 1790 had a grandson alive until 2025. To test it, you do not need to prove every event in John Tyler's life. You need to prove the specific chain that makes the headline true. John Tyler was the father of Lyon Gardiner Tyler. Lyon Gardiner Tyler was the father of Harrison Ruffin Tyler. Harrison lived until 2025. 3 propositions, 3 parts of a chain. The same method can be used in an ordinary family, where the dates are far less dramatic. Suppose a child appears in a record with a father old enough to be mistaken for a grandfather. That should trigger investigation, not automatic rejection. Look for another record created closer to the child's birth. Look for the mother. Look for siblings who move through records together. Look for a will naming the child. Look for a marriage or death record that identifies parents. If the family has a military connection, look for a pension application or dependent claim. The goal is not to find one document that gives the answer you want. The goal is to see whether independent pieces of evidence converge on the same relationship. That approach also protects against another problem: names that repeat across generations. Families often reuse first names. Cousins can have similar ages. 2 men with the same surname can live in the same county. a researcher who begins with the assumption that there is only one possible person can accidentally build a perfectly neat tree around the wrong individual. An unusual age gap makes that risk even greater, because we are tempted either to force a match or discard a real one. The answer is the same in both directions. Document the chain. This is why the records behind these stories matter as much as the stories themselves. The John Tyler papers help establish a documented family context rather than a surname-based assumption. Federal pension records exist because benefits had to be tied to legal and dependent relationships. In many cases, that meant the government needed evidence about marriages, children, deaths, and identity. And the Helen Viola Jackson story survives not simply because someone repeated an extraordinary claim, but because the marriage itself could be documented. There is a broader lesson here about family tradition. Family stories often simplify time. A relative may say, "Your grandfather knew someone from the Civil War era," or "Our family goes back to the early Republic." And later, generations may repeat the story without remembering exactly which relationship made it possible. Sometimes the story becomes exaggerated. Sometimes it becomes weaker than the truth. The Tyler case is a perfect example of why both possibilities matter. If someone casually said that a man living in the 21st century was the grandson of a president born in 1790, many listeners would assume the word grandson had been used loosely. But in this case, the literal relationship is the remarkable part. Genealogy therefore requires two habits that can seem contradictory: be skeptical and remain open to what the records actually show. Skepticism without evidence can cause a researcher to reject a real family connection simply because it looks strange. Credulity without evidence can turn a family legend into a false lineage. The middle path is documentation. That is where these three cases stop being trivia and become useful examples. Each one challenges intuition. Each one depends on a precise relationship. And each one reminds us that a family tree is not a diagram of averages. It is a record of specific people, born at specific times, connected by specific events. Once you see genealogy that way, historical distance begins to look different. A date like 1790 is still 1790. The Civil War is still the Civil War. Nothing about the chronology changes. What changes is our understanding of how few human links can sometimes separate one era from another. And that may be the most useful lesson hidden inside these apparently impossible families. The extraordinary part is not that the rules of time were somehow broken. They were not. The extraordinary part is how much history can fit inside a small number of human lives. John Tyler was born in 1790. His son Lyon was born in 1853. His grandson Harrison was born in 1928 and died in 2125. 3 generations. 2 parent-child links. 235 years from the birth of the grandfather to the death of the grandson. Irene Triplett was born to a father who was 83 and who had served in the Civil War. She lived until 2020. Helen Viola Jackson married Civil War veteran James Bolin in 1936. She lived until 2020. These are not typical American families. That is exactly why they are worth remembering. They reveal a flaw in the way we imagine the past. We tend to picture generations as evenly spaced steps leading backward into history. Real families are messier. Children are born early or late. People remarry. Some live unusually long lives. Branches move at different speeds. And, occasionally, the result is a family tree that makes 200 years look almost impossibly short. So the next time a record appears to connect 2 people whose ages seem too far apart, do not accept it automatically, but do not reject it automatically either. Ask what the records can prove. Because history is measured in years. Families are measured in lives. And those two clocks do not always move at the same speed. Now look at your own family tree. How far back can you reach in only 3 generations?